In the shadows of a half-collapsed doorway, a little girl named Lily sat curled into herself, knees hugged tight, her small body trembling in the cold. 6 years old, with tangled brown hair spilling across her face, she wore only a torn red sweater, the wool frayed and stiff with frost. Her cheeks were pale, her lips blue, but her eyes still glistened with tears. She whispered into the frozen dark, voice broken, fragile. "Please don't make me sleep outside. Please." Her cracked porcelain doll lay on her lap. Lily's tiny finger traced the faint line where the doll's cheek had shattered, as if the toy might feel her sorrow. She lifted it to her face and kissed it, whispering again, but the wind stole the words. Through the storm came the crunch of boots. At first Lily thought it was the cruel men who sometimes prowled the ruins, taking what they wanted. She pressed her doll tight, eyes wide with fear. Then another sound followed, steady, powerful, the padding of paws. Before we begin, let me know where you are watching from. Leave your country name in the comments below. And if you love stories about courage, loyalty, and community, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next stories. Out of the snow emerged a broad shape, camouflaged uniform streaked with white. Sergeant Ethan Cole, a weary soldier in his 40s, paused at the edge of the ruined street. His rifle hung across his chest, his shoulders bowed under years of battles fought and losses carried. At his side, padded Duke, a loyal German Shepherd K9, his coat dusted with snow, his ears pricked forward. The dog stopped first, nose lifting, then gave a soft whine. Ethan followed his gaze and saw the child. For a moment, the soldier's face froze, part instinct, part memory. He knew that posture, a child trying to disappear into nothing. He lowered his weapon and stepped carefully through the drifts. Duke moved ahead, but slow, head low, tail swaying in gentle reassurance. The dog circled once before settling in the snow near the girl, offering his warmth without forcing her. Lily stared at them, torn between fear and desperate hope. She clutched her doll tighter. Ethan lowered to one knee in the snow, his breath fogging. "You don't have to sleep outside tonight," he said softly, voice hoarse but kind. Lily blinked up at him, lips quivering. She didn't answer. Her eyes dropped to the dog, who had laid his head on his paws, waiting. Ethan pulled a silver locket from beneath his uniform. His thumb brushed over it before he opened it, a photo of a smiling woman and child inside. For a second, his voice faltered. Then he held it out where Lily could see. "I've lost people too," he murmured. "But you're not alone now." The storm pressed harder against the broken windows of the town, rattling loose shutters. Still, within that small circle of snow, warmth began to flicker. Not from fire, but from the way Lily's fingers loosened on her doll, the way Duke stayed steady beside her, the way Ethan did not move until she did. For a long time, neither spoke. Then Lily's lips parted, voice barely a whisper carried through the snow. "Are you going to leave me too?" Ethan's jaw tightened, the memory of the locket burning against his hand. He reached out, not forcing, only offering. "No," he said at last. "Not tonight. Not ever again." Outside, footsteps stirred in the storm. Shadows moved. Danger approached. And the soldier's eyes narrowed. The storm tightened its grip on the ruined town, pulling the night down like a hood. Ethan Cole rose from the snow with slow care, feeling the ache in his knees, the tug in his shoulder where old scars pulled tight in the cold. Duke stood and shook himself, flakes flying. The dog glanced at Ethan, then at the girl, then back, an unspoken question. "I see her," Ethan murmured. He shrugged out of his pack, pulled a wool blanket free, and draped it across Lily's narrow shoulders. The fabric swallowed her up. Only a pale face and a blossom of tangled brown hair showed above the red of her torn sweater. She flinched at the weight, then leaned into it with a small exhale, as if the blanket had given her permission to breathe. "Can you stand?" he asked. She nodded, but when she pushed up, her legs slipped on the crusted ice. Duke moved without a word. He stepped into her, steady as a post, letting her brace a hand against his neck. The girl blinked at him, surprised by the warmth humming through his coat, then tucked her fingers into the fur like sailors clutching rope. "Good boy," Ethan whispered. Duke's ear tipped back at the sound, then forward again toward the wind. They moved out from the collapsed doorway, Ethan taking point, Duke and Lily a step behind. Snow rode the air in broken sheets, stinging any skin not hidden by wool or will. The town was a map of absences, windows without glass, doorframes without doors, streets without footsteps, until Ethan made them. He cut a path with his boots, a line written for 2 small feet to follow. He kept his eyes scanning, alleys, rooflines, the ribs of a burned-out sedan. The storm ate sound, but now and then the wind coughed up a noise that wasn't its own, a bottle rolling, a board groaning, a far-off shout and the low reply of another voice. Not close yet, but moving. "Where are we going?" Lily asked, voice small inside the blanket. "Shelter," Ethan said. "There's a laundromat 2 blocks down, iron frames, good walls. If the roof held, we can light a little heat, dry you out." "Will Duke come?" Ethan almost smiled. He always does. They crossed the skeleton of an intersection where a traffic light dangled and knocked its own head against the pole. As they passed, a gust tore a billboard loose. It swung and slammed back like a door. Lily jumped and buried her face in Duke's shoulder. "Hey!" Ethan's voice found a lighter, register, the one he hadn't used since his boy was small enough to sit on his shoulders and pretend a kitchen chair was a horse. "I've got you. Eyes on me." She looked up. In the flutter of his headlamp, her irises went glossy dark. 2 coins dropped in a well. He touched the locket at his collarbone, not clutching, just feeling the cool of the metal steady his own pulse. They made the laundromat in 10 minutes that felt like an hour. The glass was gone, but the rack still stood, skeletal arms reaching for shirts that would never come. Half the ceiling tiles had collapsed. The rest sagged like wet tongues. "Inside," Ethan said. "Careful." Duke flowed through the doorway first, body low, nose cutting through the dusty cold, head turning in a slow sweep of right-left-right. He paused at the far wall, sniffed at a mound of wind-drifted snow, and flicked his tongue, as if to say all clear for now. Ethan moved them to a corner where 2 dryers and a fallen counter made a pocket. He unrolled a sleeping pad, dropped his coat for extra insulation, and motioned Lily down. Duke sat, then lay, then wriggled closer until his flank was pressed to her hip, like a furnace set to low. "Thank you," she whispered into his fur. The dog sighed. Ethan produced a small stove, cupped his hands around the spark, and teased a flame to life. He set a tin cup over it with water and a pinch of bouillon. The smell, thin, salty, real, reached Lily's face and made something in her loosen. "What's his name?" she asked after a while. "Duke." She tried it on her tongue. "Duke." The word came out like a promise and a secret. She stroked the ridge between his eyes. "Do you sleep sometimes, Duke? Or do you watch all the time like the moon?" Duke made that soft chuff he saved for children and thunder. Ethan let himself breathe the sound in. He poured the broth, tested the heat with the inside of his wrist, then passed the cup to Lily with 2 hands. "Careful," he said. "Sip." She did, eyes closing. "It feels like hands," she murmured. "Warm ones?" Ethan's throat went tight. He busied himself, set socks to warm near the stove, cut a ration bar in thirds, 1 to Lily, 1 to Duke, 1 he palmed and slid into his own cheek to soften. He pulled his gloves off and flexed his fingers until color returned. Old scars stood up like relief maps. "Where are your people?" he asked gently when the cup was empty. Lily looked at her doll. Her finger followed the fracture on the porcelain cheek. "Mum went to sleep," she said carefully, the way a child repeats a line taught by an adult who didn't want to say died. "I waited. The man at the shelter said there was no more room. He told me to find a church. I couldn't find one. Ethan kept his face still, but something inside him blistered. The locket's hinge clicked under his thumb. He didn't open it. He didn't need to. He knew the picture by heart. "We'll find warmth," he said, "and people who won't turn you away." Do they really exist? He thought about the chaplain who had prayed over empty space because there were no bodies to bury. About a medic who'd learned everyone's birthdays and wrote their mothers even when he had dirt under his nails from digging. About a dog who'd laid his head on Ethan's knee in a tent that smelled like bleach and fear and refused to move until the shaking stopped. "Yes," he said, "they do." A new sound slipped into the room, too faint for the storm to own, a shuffle along the exterior wall. Duke's head came up, ears forward. The dog's breath left him in a single gust. He looked at Ethan and then at the door. Permission and question in one. "Hold," Ethan signaled with 2 fingers, low. Duke stilled. Ethan snuffed the stove with a pinch, swept his glove over the faint glow until the dark returned to deep. He scanned the floor with the lamp pointed at the ceiling, so the beam bounced diffuse and didn't paint them as targets. 3 shadows slid under the broken window, slowed, then stopped. Voices, a slur of words, indistinct, then clearer. "Saw light? Kid? Dog prints?" Lily's hand crawled for Ethan's sleeve. He took it, squeezed once. "Quiet," he breathed. "You're not going to sleep outside, not while I stand." He slid a knife from his boot, no theatrics, just a worn habit that fit his hand, as if his bones had grown around it. He motioned Lily lower behind the dryer. Duke crept forward 2 feet and turned sideways, presenting a wider silhouette to block the gap. The dog's tail lay still. The only movement was the tremor in his whiskers. Snow whispered as boots dragged. A face, scarfed to the eyes, rose in the broken window. The eyes flicked, adjusting to the dim. They passed over Ethan's dark corner, saw the shape of a child, and brightened with a hunger that had nothing to do with food. The man lifted a crowbar. Ethan felt the click inside him, the little mechanical mercy that slides a soldier from grief into action. He palmed a coin-sized stone, tossed it hard to the far side of the room. It clattered among the empty washer drums, a sudden racket that made the man whip his head away. "Now," Ethan said. Duke launched. He hit the frame with a snarl, teeth flashing, the weight of him enough to slam the crowbar into the sill. The man yelped and toppled backward into the snow outside. Another face rose in his place. Ethan was already there, a shadow among shadows, blade angled up, not to take a throat but to press a warning along the seam of a coat until skin remembered it could bleed. "Walk," Ethan said. "Walk now and keep walking. You don't want what comes next." A third voice, older, cracked. "Soldier," it called from the dark. "We're not here to die." "Then don't," Ethan said. "Leave." A beat, then a curse, then boots scrambled, sliding, receding. The storm swallowed the sound, chewed it, and spit back only wind. Ethan waited a long 30 seconds, listening the way you listen to your own breath in a med tent at 3 a.m., counting, testing, making sure it's still yours. Only when Duke's ears eased and the dog blew out a long sigh did Ethan lower the knife. The stove's pinprick flame returned. Heat met air, and the room sighed with it. Lily at last released the breath she'd been hoarding. "You didn't hurt them," she whispered. "Didn't have to," Ethan said. "They decided to live." Duke returned to her, pressing his wide head under her small hand until her fingers were forced to curl around him. She laughed then, thin, exhausted, true. It tightened Ethan's chest like a good ache. "Will they come back?" she asked. "They might," he said. Honesty was a kind of warmth too. "We won't be here by then." He fed the stove a little more fuel, enough to heat the bit of water left. He set Lily's socks near the edge of the flame and held his palms over them, catching and shaping the warmth like a priest shapes a blessing. He nodded at the blanket. "Lie down," he said. "Duke and I will keep first watch." She obeyed, curling on her side, the porcelain doll tucked at her throat like a talisman. Her eyes found him once more. "Are you going to be here when I wake up?" Ethan set his back to the dryer, the knife point down between his boots, the locket cold and centered on his chest. "Yes," he said. "When you wake, I'll be here." Her lids drooped. She began to hum, a scrap of tune fumbling into the world. Duke's breathing fell into rhythm with it. The laundromat made soft noises, metal cooling, snow tapping, wind getting bored of its own voice. Ethan let his head rest against the metal, eyes on the black square of the window. He let himself imagine a place north where the windows still held and the doors had locks and the people inside counted bowls instead of bullets. He filed it under tomorrow, a word he had not used in years. Some time later, the wind shifted. It brought a smell Ethan had learned to pass in a dozen countries and 100 alleys: oil, cold iron, the faint, animal-sharp tang of men who haven't eaten enough to be merciful. It came from the east. "Duke," he whispered. The dog lifted his head. Ethan tapped 2 fingers twice on his thigh. Second watch. Duke rose and moved to the doorway, a quiet gate in a broken wall. Ethan adjusted his grip on the knife, his other hand ghosting to the locket, thumb resting on the hinge without opening it. Not clutching, just remembering. Lily stirred, as if some part of her heard what the wind said. She didn't wake. She whispered into the seam of sleep and breath, a plea so soft it could have been the stove's sigh. "Please, don't make me sleep outside again." He answered, a sleeping child, the way he'd never been able to answer his dead. "Never," he breathed. "Not while I live." Outside, faint and fast, came the pattern of approaching feet, more than before. Different cadence, disciplined. Ethan's jaw set. He slid the knife back into his boot and, with a practiced smoothness, lifted the rifle he had hoped not to need tonight. On the wind came a new sound, the clipped murmur of radios, the snap of a flashlight's beam finding edges, and the barked order of someone who owned his own authority. Not scavengers, not thieves, authorities. A fist banged twice against the frame. "City relief," a voice called, official and cold. "Occupants inside, step out, surrender the child, curfew enforcement." Duke's growl rolled like distant thunder. Lily slept on, a little warmth at the center of a world that had forgotten how. Ethan looked at the door, then at the child, then at the dog. He felt the old line draw itself under his feet, the one that separates law from right. He stood, and the night waited to see what kind of man he would be. The pounding at the frame rattled the laundromat's skeleton. Snow sifted down from the sagging ceiling tiles, dusting Lily's blanket. She stirred, not yet waking, her cracked doll slipping from her hands. "Occupants," the voice repeated outside. "By authority of the City Relief Committee, you are ordered to surrender the child for relocation. Failure to comply will be treated as resistance." Sergeant Ethan Cole kept his rifle angled low, finger flat against the guard. He had stood in doorways like this before, in countries whose names now blended into dust. He had followed orders then, sometimes noble, sometimes grey. But never had he been asked to surrender a child to strangers whose faces he couldn't see. Duke's hackles bristled, his growl a rolling thunder too quiet to mistake. He pressed himself between the doorway and the sleeping girl, his body a living wall. Ethan raised his voice, controlled. "This child is under my care. She isn't leaving with anyone tonight." Outside, boots shuffled. A radio crackled, static hissing before another voice, more clipped, came through. "Then she's under arrest, soldier. You have 10 seconds before we come in." Ethan's stomach knotted. The word soldier spat like an accusation, not an honor, tore through his chest. He thought of the locket against his skin, the photo of wife and son inside, the reason he had once sworn to protect. He touched it with one gloved hand, grounding himself. Duke's low rumble deepened, vibrating against the floor. His eyes never left the door. Lily shifted again, eyes fluttering. She blinked awake into the dim. "What's happening?" she whispered. Ethan knelt, steadying her shoulders. "Just noise," he said, voice softer than the storm. "Stay close to Duke." She nodded, trust lighting her pale face even in fear. She pressed her cheek against Duke's neck, small fingers gripping his fur. Outside, the countdown began. 10, 9, 8. Ethan swallowed. Think. To fight would draw blood, and blood would draw more. To obey meant betrayal, and betrayal would break something in Lily that no warmth could ever fix. His hand found hers, tiny and trembling under the blanket. "No matter what," he whispered, "you will not be alone." 5, 4, 3. Ethan's eyes swept the laundromat. The broken window, the side door half blocked by a dryer. The narrow gap in the wall where bricks had fallen away. Roots, risks. He could take one shot, draw them to cover, then run with the girl and the dog through the snow. He had done more with less. But Lily's legs were weak. She wouldn't last a chase. He turned to Duke. The dog's ears flicked once, as if reading his mind. Ethan gave the signal, "Wait, protect." Duke pressed closer to the girl, lowering his head, eyes locked on the door. 2. Ethan lifted the rifle, not to shoot, but to show. He aimed high toward the frame above the intruder's head, finger steady. 1. The door burst inward. Snow and light poured in with the silhouettes of 3 men in patchwork uniforms. Their rifles gleamed, muzzles sweeping the room. Ethan fired once, the shot exploding against the lintel, wood splintering into their faces. "Stand down!" he roared. "One more step, and it's war in here!" Duke lunged, a snarl ripping through the air, forcing the lead man to stumble back. The intruders froze, momentarily blinded by the blast and the sudden wall of fury that was a German shepherd's teeth. Lily screamed, clutching Duke's collar. "Don't take me!" Her voice cracked into the snow-heavy night, sharp enough to cut through years of silence in Ethan's heart. The men hesitated. Their leader spat into the snow. "She won't survive with you. You're no guardian, just another broken soldier clinging to ghosts." Ethan's chest rose, breath ragged. His eyes burned. "Maybe, but I'll die before I let her be another lost number on your ledger." The standoff stretched, snow swirling between them. Then, from farther back, another officer shouted, "Leave it! Too much noise! We'll mark the shelter for return." The 3 men lowered their rifles, retreating with curses. Their boots faded into the storm until only the wind remained. Silence pressed in. The broken door sagged on its hinges. Ethan lowered his rifle, exhaling hard. Duke returned to Lily's side, pressing his body against hers until her sobs softened into shivers. Ethan pulled them both close, the 3 of them a single knot of breath and warmth in the freezing ruin. Lily looked up at him, eyes red, cheeks streaked with tears. "You didn't let them take me," she whispered. "No," Ethan said, voice thick. He brushed a hand over her tangled hair. "And I never will." The porcelain doll slipped from her lap into the snow-dusted floor, landing face down, its crack deepening. Ethan froze, the image hitting him like a memory he couldn't shake. The child bent to retrieve it, whispering, "You're safe now, too." And Ethan realized she wasn't just talking to the doll, she was talking to him. The storm did not forgive. It bit their faces raw, clawed at their lungs, filled their footprints even before the next step fell. Ethan Cole pressed forward, rifle slung across his chest, his free hand steadying Lily, whose small body stumbled more often than it walked. Duke padded ahead, ears pricked, reading the road the way only a dog could, nose to the wind, muscles taut like drawn wire. Behind them the town was already gone, swallowed by snow and darkness. Ahead, nothing but the moan of wind through hollowed houses. Ethan scanned the horizon. He knew this terrain, every ruin a possible shelter, every corner a possible trap. Lily's lips were pale, her teeth chattering behind the blanket he had wrapped around her. "I'm tired," she whispered. "I know," Ethan said. He crouched, let her climb onto his back, and adjusted the strap so her weight rested across his broad frame. Her cracked doll dangled from her mitten, bumping against his shoulder. "Hold on to me, we'll stop soon." Duke barked once, sharp and low. His body stiffened, nose locked on a dark shape ahead. Ethan narrowed his eyes. Through the sheets of white, a house emerged, a 2-story farmhouse with boarded windows and a door barely hanging from its hinges. It was something. They pushed inside. The air smelled of rot and smoke, but it was dry. Furniture lay broken across the floor. Ethan swept the room with his rifle, slow and methodical. Duke prowled the corners, nostrils flaring. "All clear," Ethan muttered, though his gut didn't agree. He set Lily down. She hugged her doll, blinking in the gloom. "Is this home?" "Not home," Ethan said softly. "Just rest." He dragged a cabinet across the door, propped it against the frame. Duke settled by the entry, head on paws but eyes open, tracking every creak. Ethan lit the stove again. The small flame danced, chasing shadows up the walls. He poured water into the tin, added broth powder. The smell filled the air, thin but enough to trick the body into thinking it was safe. Lily sat cross-legged by the flame, doll in her lap. She traced the porcelain crack with a finger, whispering words Ethan couldn't hear. When she looked up, her eyes glistened. "She's cold too, but I told her you'll take care of us." Ethan swallowed hard, gaze falling to the locket hidden under his coat. He wanted to believe it. He wanted to believe he could keep that promise, but then a noise. Not the house groaning, not the storm. A distinct step on the porch. Slow. Intentional. Duke rose like a spring uncoiled, lips peeling back in silence. His fur bristled, the growl deep in his chest like a drumbeat of warning. Ethan's hand went to his rifle. He slid in front of Lily, his shadow covering hers. "Quiet," he breathed. The porch creaked again, then the sound of a hand on the door. Wood groaned against the cabinet. A whisper of laughter slipped through the cracks, muffled and chilling. Lily clutched her doll, pressing into the soldier's leg. "Who is it?" she whispered. Ethan's jaw tightened. His body shifted, weight balanced, rifle raised. "Not a friend," he said. The door rattled harder. Snow blew in through the gaps, hissing as it touched the stove flame. Shadows shifted against the boards, multiple figures moving outside. Lily's breath caught. She pressed her face against Duke's fur, whispering into his ear, desperate. "Don't let them in. Don't let them take me." And in that whisper, Ethan felt the old steel return to his bones, the line between survival and surrender, between keeping a promise and breaking it. He knew what he had to do. He would not let her sleep outside. He would not let her be taken. Not tonight. Not ever. The door shuddered, hinges groaning. Ethan's finger tightened on the trigger. And the storm roared louder, as if the night itself had chosen a side. The first crash splintered the wood. The cabinet Ethan had dragged across the doorway shuddered, dust shaking loose from the ceiling. Duke lunged to his feet, a growl tearing from deep inside his chest, loud enough to make Lily clutch her doll to her chest and hide her face in his fur. "Stay behind me," Ethan Cole ordered, his voice a low rasp. He steadied his rifle, eyes narrowed on the door. His pulse slowed, not racing, but sharpening, the way it always had, when the line between life and death thinned to a breath. Another slam. The hinges screamed. A voice outside hissed, "Open up, soldier! Don't make us burn you out!" Laughter followed, sharp and hungry. Ethan lowered himself into a crouch, aligning with the jagged gap between the boards. He could see them, shadows in the storm, 3, maybe 4 men, scarves over their faces, makeshift weapons glinting in the lantern light. Desperate men, dangerous men. He didn't want a firefight, not with Lily here, but he wouldn't let them breach. The cabinet jumped again as the door bowed inward. One hand forced through the crack, fingers clawing. Duke exploded forward, jaws snapping. His teeth clamped down on the intruder's wrist. A scream ripped through the night, the arm yanked back, blood smearing the snow outside. "Duke, back!" Ethan barked. The dog retreated instantly, chest heaving, lips still curled. The screams turned to rage. Another body slammed into the door. The wood fractured, a gap wide enough now for cold air and danger to pour through. Ethan fired once, a warning shot that cracked the top frame and showered the porch with splinters. The intruders froze, startled by the precision of the shot. "This is your only chance," Ethan shouted. His voice carried through the storm, rough but steady. "Walk away, or—" "You won't walk at all." Silence. Then a bitter laugh. "You can't save her forever, soldier. One day you'll sleep and we'll come back." Ethan's grip on the rifle tightened. He thought of Lily's whisper, "Please don't make me sleep outside." He thought of the locket under his shirt, the faces inside it. He lowered his aim from warning to lethal. Through the storm, boots retreated. Voices faded, muttering curses into the night. The snow swallowed them, leaving only the howl of wind. Inside, Ethan didn't relax. He waited, rifle ready, listening until even Duke's ears lowered, his growl softening into a huff. Only then did Ethan turn. Lily sat trembling, doll crushed against her chest. Her wide eyes locked on his, brimming with tears. "They wanted to take me," she whispered. "They didn't," Ethan answered firmly, crossing the room. He crouched in front of her, setting the rifle aside. "And they won't." Her chin quivered. "But what if you're not here?" Ethan reached out, gently pushing her tangled hair back from her face. "I'll be here," he said. "Until you're safe, I'll always be here." Duke pressed his head into Lily's lap, the weight of him steady, grounding. She buried her fingers in his fur, tears spilling freely now. Outside, the storm raged. Inside, the farmhouse felt smaller, the shadows heavier. Ethan knew they couldn't stay long. The intruders would return, or worse, send others. But in Lily's whisper, in Duke's unwavering stance, he found the strength to plan the next step. He sat back, cleaning the rifle with slow, deliberate care, every motion a vow written in steel. Tomorrow they would leave this house. Tomorrow they would keep moving. Tomorrow he would not fail them. For tonight, though, he built the fire higher, sat between the girl and the door, and let his eyes stay open long into the storm. Dawn came slowly, a pale smear of light fighting its way through the storm. The farmhouse stood battered but still, its broken door marked with boot prints and blood. Ethan Cole stood at the threshold, scanning the white horizon. The air was quieter now, but he knew silence could be a mask. "Time to move," he said. Lily rubbed her eyes, tangled brown hair falling across her face. She still clutched the cracked porcelain doll, her torn red sweater buried beneath Ethan's oversized coat. She looked small, swallowed by fabric and fear, but she nodded. "Okay." Duke padded forward, nose low to the snow, tail stiff. He had not stopped checking the air since the night before. Ethan adjusted his pack, slung the rifle across his chest, then crouched to Lily's height. "You stay between me and Duke, always. Understand?" She nodded again, gripping the dog's fur as if it were a lifeline. They set out into the fields. Snow stretched endless and cruel, swallowing fences, barns, whole roads. The world had become a white ocean, and they were three, figures walking its frozen waves. Ethan carried Lily part of the way when her legs faltered. Her head rested against his shoulder, her breath warm against the scar at his collarbone. The doll dangled against his pack, the crack in its cheek deepening with each bump. "Are we going somewhere good?" she asked once, half asleep. "Yes," Ethan said. "There's a place ahead, a church. If the roof still holds, it will keep us warm." She stirred. "Will God be there?" Ethan hesitated. His hand brushed the locket at his chest. He thought of the faces inside, the people he had begged God to save and lost anyway. He didn't know what waited inside a church anymore. But he looked at her, fragile and stubborn, and answered, "If we believe hard enough, maybe he's already walking with us." Duke barked once, breaking the moment. His body stiffened, ears forward. Ethan froze. Ahead, faint in the snow, smoke curled into the sky. Not black, grey, steady. A fire meant people. People meant hope or danger. They approached cautiously. Through the trees the church rose, stone walls weathered and cracked, stained glass shattered, the steeple leaning like a tired sentinel. But smoke did rise from its chimney, and footprints crisscrossed the snow outside its doors. Ethan stopped short, scanning. Shapes moved at the gate, bundled figures armed with nothing more than wooden poles and makeshift blades. Refugees, survivors. Lily pressed against his leg. People, she whispered, equal parts wonder and dread. Duke sniffed the air, then gave a low whine, as if reminding Ethan that choice had to come now. Ethan dropped to one knee in the snow, meeting Lily's eyes. We can try. Maybe they'll take us in. Her fingers twisted in the doll's cracked dress. What if they send us away? Ethan's voice firmed, steady as the rifle at his side. Then we walk again, but you won't be alone. Not ever. They reached the church gate. The guards, two teenage boys wrapped in torn blankets, spears trembling in their hands, lowered their weapons uncertainly. A woman's voice rang from inside. Who's there? Ethan stood taller. A soldier, a child, and a dog. Silence. Then the door creaked open, just enough for a face to peer through, lined with age, tired, but not unkind. Bring them in, she said. Relief washed over Lily's face. She squeezed Duke's neck, whispering, We found it. We found home. But as they stepped through the gate, Ethan's eyes caught on something carved into the wood above the church door. A mark he recognized from another life, another war. A mark that meant rules, rationing, and control. This was no simple refuge, and in his gut he knew safety always came with a cost. The heavy wooden doors closed behind them, muting the storm into a distant hum. Inside the church the air was warmer but heavy with the smell of smoke, damp wool, and too many bodies in too little space. Candles flickered along broken pews, casting shadows across the cracked stone walls. Lily's eyes widened. Dozens of faces stared back at her, families wrapped in rags, old men clutching rosaries, children half hidden in their mothers' coats. She pressed closer to Duke, her cracked porcelain doll hugged tight, her tangled brown hair falling over her eyes. Ethan Cole let his gaze sweep the room. He had been in places like this before, barracks, camps, outposts, where survival trumped everything else. He recognized the order behind the chaos. Beds were laid in rows, rations were stacked in neat piles behind a makeshift altar. And near the pulpit a group of people stood apart, watchers, organizers, the ones who decided who ate, who stayed, who was turned away. An older woman in a patched coat stepped forward. Her face was lined, her eyes sharp. "Welcome," she said. "I am Sister Margaret. This is a place of shelter, but it is not free. Everyone contributes." Ethan inclined his head. "We'll pull our weight." She studied him, then glanced at Lily. "The child stays with the women and little ones, safer that way." Lily's hand shot out, clutching Ethan's sleeve. "No!" Her voice cracked, desperate. "Please don't make me leave him! Please don't make me sleep outside again!" The church grew silent, every pair of eyes turning toward them. Ethan crouched to her level, resting a calloused hand over hers. "I'm not letting you go anywhere," he said softly. His eyes lifted to Sister Margaret's. "She stays with me. Always." The nun's mouth pressed thin, but she didn't argue. Instead, she gestured toward the side of the church where straw mats lined the floor. "Then you'll sleep there. But remember, food is rationed, rules are strict. Break them and you're out." Ethan gave a short nod. "Understood." They moved to the corner. Duke curled at Lily's side, his body curved protectively around her small frame. She buried her face in his fur, tears leaking silently into his coat. Ethan sat close, his rifle across his knees, eyes never leaving the room. That night, as candles burned low, Ethan watched. He saw the hunger in men's eyes when rations were handed out, He saw the guards at the door, boys too young to know how to kill but old enough to try. He saw the way Sister Margaret spoke with quiet authority and how quickly people obeyed. This place was shelter, but it was also a cage. Lily stirred in her sleep, whispering, "Daddy, don't go." The words sliced through Ethan like shrapnel. He touched the locket at his chest, thumb brushing over the image inside, then looked at her small face pressed against Duke's flank. "Not going anywhere," he murmured, voice low, a vow meant for her alone. But even as he said it, he knew the storm outside was not their only threat. Sometimes danger wore the shape of walls. The church bells no longer rang for worship. They rang for order. By morning, Ethan Cole had learned the rhythm, a short clang for meal lines, 2 for work shifts, 3 for curfew. The system was efficient but cold, numbers before names, obedience before mercy. He sat with his back against a cracked pillar, cleaning his rifle. Across the room, Lily sat cross-legged with her cracked porcelain doll, her tangled brown hair falling into her face as she tried to braid it with clumsy fingers. Duke lay beside her, chin on his paws, golden eyes tracking anyone who came too close. "Brother Cole?" The voice was Sister Margaret's. She stood in the aisle, her patched coat brushing the floor. "We need to speak." Ethan rose slowly, rifle slung. He followed her to the pulpit where a small group of leaders gathered. Their faces were thin, their eyes calculating. "The child eats but does not work," one man said. His tone was sharp, brittle with hunger. "Every mouth must earn its place." "She's 6, Ethan said flatly. "She can fetch water, gather wood, clean, or—" The man's gaze flicked toward the door, where the storm raged white. "She can make room for others more useful." The words hit Ethan like a fist. He felt the weight of his locket against his chest, the photo inside pressing into his skin. He remembered his boy's face, remembered the promises he couldn't keep. Not again. He stepped closer, his voice low but steady. "She's not going anywhere. If you want her gone, you'll have to go through me." Silence. The leaders glanced at one another. Sister Margaret's eyes lingered on Ethan, searching. Finally, she said, "Very well. But protection has a price. You'll take extra shifts at the gate." Ethan nodded once. "Done." When he returned to Lily, she looked up, sensing the weight in his stride. "Are we leaving?" she asked, clutching the doll. "Not yet," he said. He knelt, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "But if they ever try to take you, we walk, understand?" She nodded. Her small hand slipped into his. "I trust you." That night, as the storm battered the walls, Ethan took his post at the gate. The cold cut into him, but his eyes never wavered. Behind him, Lily slept curled against Duke, her whispers soft in the dark. Near dawn, she stirred, half dreaming, her lips brushing against the dog's fur. Ethan leaned closer to hear. Her whisper was fragile, but it pierced him deeper than any bullet. "Please don't let me wake up alone. You're my dad now." Ethan's breath caught. His knees buckled before he knew it, the rifle slipping from his hands into the snow-dusted floor. For years he had carried the silence of grief, the weight of ghosts. But in that whisper the dam broke. Tears burned hot down his frozen face. Duke shifted closer, pressing against him. Lily stirred again, eyes fluttering open. She saw him weeping, and without a word, she crawled into his lap, wrapping thin arms around his neck. Ethan held her tight, the locket pressing between them, his heart beating against hers. "Never," he whispered, voice shaking but certain. "You'll never wake up alone, not while I live." The storm raged outside, but inside the broken church, 3 souls leaned into one another. And for the first time in years, Ethan believed in tomorrow.